After several delays, Big Ten Commissioner Tony Petitti has suspended Jim Harbaugh from coaching for the rest of the regular season. He can coach during the week with his team, draw up game plans, and break down film, meet with his assistant coaches and coordinators, and individually with players. He can function as a normal head coach for every day but one, that being Saturday. He cannot be on the sidelines or in the press box or coaching in any capacity on game day for the rest of the regular season. He cannot be in the vicinity of the game venue. He cannot be at the stadium, whether that's Michigan Stadium, whether that's Beaver Stadium, or whether that's Maryland Stadium. I think the name is SECU Stadium for Maryland and College Park. He cannot be on the sidelines, can't be in the press box, can't be at the game venue, but he can be just about anywhere else, helping his team in any capacity, game planning, so on, so forth. Before we get further into this news and before we break it down, I want to encourage you to subscribe to the channel and click the notification bell so that you can be notified when I post more updates about Michigan football and this whole sign stealing ordeal, and also talk more about Big Ten football, college football, and the sport, the game. Not just the off-field news, because this is only the second video I've really made on this topic, the third if you include a live stream that I did discussing this. And that's because I only want to report on what known information is out there and what has been confirmed. I don't like necessarily going off of rumors. And also, this is off the field. This isn't on the field. This is off the field business. And the NCAA is painfully slow at putting together investigations, at least in what we would typically assume to be a timely fashion. Make sure to like the video, comment your thoughts on the Big Ten's suspension of Jim Harbaugh down in the comment section below. I know that Michigan is going to try and fight this so that Jim Harbaugh can be on the sidelines. As much as I thought, however, that Tony Petitti was maybe posturing or being a weak commissioner as early as this morning, I think that what he did was potentially a reasonable compromise, or at least a workaround from allowing Michigan to file an injunction or a restraining order, because Jim Harbaugh can still coach in every way except for on game day. He can draw up game plans, he can provide his analysis, his insight, he can attend practices, do everything a head coach can do outside of being the head coach on game day for typically 4 hours on any given Saturday. And it's just for the rest of the regular season. So if Michigan remains unscathed through the regular season and beats Penn State, beats Maryland, beats Ohio State, Jim Harbaugh would be able to coach in the Big Ten championship game, and he'd be able to coach his team in the college football playoff, assuming they win the Big Ten championship game as well, and go on. So Michigan can still play for a national championship. Jim Harbaugh can still coach for a national championship. And the Big Ten has only suspended Jim Harbaugh for 3 games. They suspended him today after he game planned for the game against Penn State. You can expect that while his lack of presence on the sidelines, especially in a loud environment, could hurt Michigan, this will also likely galvanize the roster around him and give the team a jolt of energy, a much needed jolt of energy and motivation, as if they didn't have any already, heading into a Penn State team that is going to operate in the hornet's nest that is Beaver Stadium. But Michigan, even with this suspension, and even with the outside noise, but the suspension especially, because not having your head coach very often can hurt your team. Michigan, I don't think, this is coming from a Michigan fan, so expect me to say things or talk from a point of view that maybe I don't typically talk from. Michigan cannot, under any circumstances, lose their next 3 games. This Michigan team, from what I have watched in the first 9 games, again, this is me with my Michigan glasses on. I'm not trying to be super objective here because I'm reacting to this as a fan, but also, a little later in this episode, I'll be reacting just from an objective point of view, reading an article by Yahoo about this suspension that I will link down below. This team is too good. They are too good that with a suspension like this that allows Harbaugh to still game plan and operate as a head coach for 6 out of 7 days in the given week, they have too good of assistants, too elite of assistants, and too elite of players to lose in these next 3 games. There are no excuses. None. There's no excuse to lose on the road to a Penn State team that has a lethargic offense, as a head coach in James Franklin who cannot manage a game properly, especially a big game. No excuse. Michigan's a favorite. No excuse to lose there. There's no excuse to lose to a Maryland team who has fallen flat after starting 5-0, but I think we already knew that. For Ohio State, I do not care that Jim Harbaugh likely won't be on the sidelines. Maybe he will be because maybe Michigan does win their case and through an injunction or a restraining order or whatever they have up their sleeve, maybe he will coach in these final 3 games, but I'm just going to assume that that won't be the case. I don't care. I don't care that Jim Harbaugh won't be there to coach against Ryan Day. I don't care. The game's in Ann Arbor. Michigan, from what we know, has the much better offense, the much more efficient offense, and they have a defense that is comparable to Ohio State's, if not better, looking at the statistics. Michigan's allowing 4 less points per game. Michigan's defense is number 1 in efficiency, according to ESPN. They're at home. The weather and just the November environment typically favors Michigan and how they're built compared to Ohio State. Even with the Buckeyes' adjustments, they're not consistent enough in the ground or pass attack, and they don't have that same physicality up front that Michigan does. Michigan still has an advantage over Ohio State in these November conditions at home and with their scheme, even with Ohio State making good changes or at least trying to adapt in the face of their own adversity against Michigan. There is no excuse to lose any of these next few games. Anything less than 12-0, 13-0, 14-0, anything less than a national championship this year, given the chaos that is surrounding the program, and also given the mess that the University of Michigan and that Jim Harbaugh and Connor Stallions got the team into, anything less than 15-0 is unacceptable, because depending on what punishments are levied against this school, there could be some serious ramifications, and there likely will be some pretty significant or serious ramifications after this season, especially considering the fact that Jim Harbaugh might leave after this year. He might leave, and why wouldn't he want to leave? So for Michigan, go out, win. I do not want to hear any Michigan fan, if Michigan loses to Penn State, say, well, if Jim Harbaugh was on the sidelines, we would have won. No. James Franklin is 3-16 against top 10 teams. Michigan's the more efficient team in just about every category except for defensive yards allowed, which I'd argue is an overrated statistic. They're favored to win. Michigan is more experienced. And Penn State, yeah, they faced Ohio State. They're more battle-tested in theory, but outside of that lone game against Ohio State on the road where they got punked, their strength of schedule is comparable to Michigan's. And for Ohio State, it's the game. Ohio State fans would say the exact same thing if Day was suspended. You go out there and you win. In the same way that Ohio State has a talent advantage over Michigan, and Ohio State fans and coaches should be aware of that and point that out, Michigan fans and coaches should be aware of the fact that we, the Wolverines, have a 2-game win streak against Ohio State. A 2-game win streak. Dominant victories. And Michigan this year has more experience returning. Michigan, for the first time in ages, has a better offense than Ohio State. They have a better O-line. I'd argue a better run game, a better quarterback, deeper tight end room. And with Stover not necessarily being healthy, I'd argue better tight end room as well. And Michigan defensively, I think they have the better line, better linebacker core, maybe the better secondary. I mean, Michigan has large, humongous advantages over everyone else in the Big Ten. Use them. There is no excuse to lose. I will not make excuses for my team if they lose to Penn State or Ohio State. You give credit where it's due. If James Franklin wins, I will give him his flowers. If Day wins, I will give him his flowers. If Michigan wins with or without Jim Harbaugh, in these next 3 games, I will give them their flowers. If they lose, I will tear them to shreds. Not the players, rather the coaches, etc. The players are great, and the players, honestly, you got to feel bad for them, regardless of who you're a fan of. That was just me going briefly into my Michigan fan mode. You'll probably see more of that when I go live to react to the Penn State-Michigan game and call it live while it's going on. For Michigan, is this to a certain degree an escape from punishment? I know that this might be somewhat controversial take, but Tony Petitti tried to find a middle ground between a full suspension for Harbaugh and also taking no action. And for Michigan, again, this is part of the reason why I was passionate just a few seconds ago in saying there are no excuses. He still gets to game plan. He still gets to give all of his brain and all of his analysis and thought process, advice, training, you name it. He gets to give his entire being to the program for 6 out of 7 days instead of 7 out of 7 days. Now, that's big. It's a big loss. But it's a loss that I think this team is elite enough to manage without much drop-off, especially against Penn State tomorrow. I think that the most severe effects from this suspension will be either felt against Maryland or against Ohio State. I don't think it'll be the case against Penn State, because Jim Harbaugh is traveling with this team. The Michigan players are going to be angry at this news. They're going to be galvanized. At the same time, there's an argument that maybe their emotion could be used against them, but who knows? This team's mature. I think they'll take it well, and Michigan has elite assistants. Sharon Moore calls the plays on an offense that's top 10 in scoring. Jesse Minter calls plays for the number 1 defense in terms of efficiency, points allowed per game, and points per play allowed on defense. These are more than capable assistants. These are Broyles Award caliber assistants. All of them will be there, except for Harbaugh, and obviously Jesse Minter, who was fired a few weeks ago. So, if you're Michigan, you just have to stay the course. You have to trust yourselves. The players have to trust the coaches that without Jim Harbaugh, the assistants know what they're doing. They have to put their faith in, and hopefully they've already done this, put their faith in many men rather than just one individual man. And the staff has to trust the players. Sharon Moore or Jesse Minter, whoever is named to be the head coach, I'm hoping that it's Sharon Moore. Whoever that is, look, they have to trust the players. And they have to quickly get a grasp on the situation very quickly. I know that, Jesse Minter was the coach against East Carolina, and Sharon Moore was the coach against Bowling Green, and to a certain degree, I, ripped Sharon Moore for that performance against Bowling Green. But the more we get further from that, I realize that I think that game against Bowling Green was just a fluke and an anomaly, and it was really bad play from J.J. McCarthy, not bad play calling or game management by Sharon Moore. So whether it's Minter or Moore, I trust either of them to manage this team for the remainder of the regular season. Michigan will have their head coach during the week, but he cannot be coaching during game day. Larger punishments, I expect, will be handed out in the future. Until then, though, Michigan's only punishment this season is Harbaugh being suspended for the regular season. So if Michigan goes 12-0, wins their Big Ten championship game to go 13-0, Harbaugh will be coaching for a national championship, because I don't think the College Football Playoff Committee is going to ban an undefeated Michigan from the playoff, and the NCAA is painfully slow with their investigative process. Let's read this article from yahoo.com that I will link down below and then get on out of here. This is by Ross Dellinger and Dan Wetzel. Big Ten Commissioner Tony Petitti has suspended Michigan coach Jim Harbaugh for 3 games or the rest of the Wolverines' regular season, citing the league's sportsmanship provision. The suspension only applies to game days, so Harbaugh will be able to coach the team during the week. The punishment is in response to Michigan staff member Connor Stalions allegedly running an in-person scouting operation where he sent friends to games to record the sideline play signals of future Michigan opponents. The decision comes just hours before number 2 Michigan is set to play at number 10, not 11, Penn State on Saturday. The Wolverines were in the process of traveling to State College, Pennsylvania, when the decision came down. Both the University of Michigan and Harbaugh's personal attorney, Tom Mars, have vowed a legal challenge. It is expected they will seek a stay from a judge on Friday that would allow Harbaugh to coach Saturday. A more permanent injunction would be sought after that. While Friday is a federal holiday, Veterans Day, that might be another reason why Petitti did this, by the way, is you hold on until Friday, then maybe Michigan is stuck in a hole and they at least get some punishment against Penn State. It is common for courts to have a judge present or on call for emergency stays or issues that arise in all kinds of business disputes. If the suspension holds, it would force Harbaugh to miss Michigan's final 3 regular season games at Penn State, at Maryland, and home in the end of the season rivalry contest against Ohio State. Michigan offensive coordinator Sharon Moore would be expected to serve as interim head coach if Harbaugh is not able to coach. ESPN was the first to report the suspension, thanks to Pete Thamel, very reliable reporter and insider. Both the Wolverines and Buckeyes are currently 9-0, and that game would likely hold significant Big Ten and college football playoff implications. Harbaugh would be eligible to return for both the Big Ten title game on December 2nd and the college football playoff if Michigan qualifies. The center of the case is Connor Stalions, a former U.S. Naval Academy grad and Marine captain, on the staff and serving as both a recruiting analyst and sign stealer. This is going into all of Stalions' operations and why Harbaugh is being suspended, so I'm skipping down. Thus far, a few paragraphs lower, sources tell Yahoo Sports the NCAA has found no ties to Harbaugh or knowledge that Harbaugh knew of Stalions' in-person tactics. Under a, quote, strict liability rule, end quote, that just took effect this year, the NCAA can hold Harbaugh responsible for the actions of any of his assistants or staff members regardless of knowledge. The Big Ten has a similar rule, but it applies to, quote, institutions, so it would hold the University of Michigan responsible, not individual head coaches. In a letter sent to the Big Ten, Michigan has demanded the Big Ten wait until the full NCAA investigation plays out before issuing a punishment, warning that a lack of due process is not only unfair in its own right, but sets up a dangerous precedent that the league will regret going forward. I will have to say, as a Michigan fan, it's somewhat hypocritical given that Jim Harbaugh and the University of Michigan has, called for action, or at least Michigan fans have called for action on numerous other occasions that void due process. However, when you're right, even if you're a hypocrite, you are right. And if due process applies here, which I'm not a law expert, so I'm going to refrain from that, then it should remain. But I'm not really going to comment on the letter from the Big Ten or for the Big Ten from Michigan outside of the fact, be careful. Don't bite the hand that feeds you, and just try not to be a hypocrite. The 59-year-old Harbaugh is in his 9th season at his alma mater, posting an 80-25 record, and he may return to the NFL. Michigan has won the last 2 Big Ten championships, both with Stalions on staff. That's all I have to say in this video. Michigan, maybe they escaped from punishment. If Michigan wins out without Jim Harbaugh, they escaped from punishment because the result on the field, if you're 13-0 and in 6 of those games were won without your head coach, you have a pretty darn elite football team. I don't care what anyone says. And I don't care if the Big Ten is weaker than we think it is now, and right now we assume that it's pretty weak outside of Penn State and Ohio State. So maybe Michigan at the end of the day still escapes from at least a severe punishment because they can still play in Indy, they can still play in the college football playoff, and I think with Harbaugh coaching the week, or during the week, not with the week, but during the week, there won't be much fall off in terms of game management. Thank you so much for watching this video. Make sure to check out my Patreon page via the link in the description down below or in the pinned comment. Thanks to Crash2488, Anthony McDowell, Justin Rogg, Spencer Bringhurst, Noah DDLC, SFS Inverted, Will Loftus, Gabriel Calendar, Roaming Gnome, Matthew Sale, Chris Lane, Austin Christmas, and Zubin Zah for being Patreon supporters. Have a phenomenal day, guys, and I will see you soon. Go Blue, and bye-bye.